Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by my Pokemon loving pal, Tucker Hazel, and we are here today to do it. We are here to finally discuss Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Now, this is not a review.
No.
Our full review will come at the end of the week once we both finish the game, but instead it's kind of a check-in to see were we right in
Hmm.
our pre-release assumptions about Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. But before we share our thoughts, if you want to talk to us about Pokemon or anything else at all, make sure to join our Discord link as usual. Top of the description, only down there. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely do that because our Pikmin Bloom grift is drying up and
Sure, yeah, it
the
really
sub
is.
count's plateauing a little bit. So keep
As
boosting those
as it
numbers.
as it naturally will. I'm not complaining about that, but
Yes,
and
goose the
also I think
numbers.
I think Pikmin Bloom's popularity is kind of plateauing as well. I don't think that's going to get any new players.
Oh boy. But Tucker, you have played significantly more of the game than I have. You've played like 16 hours or
Mhm.
so. I have played about five. I have gotten two gym badges. I'm through Cycling Road, and I think I'm through another route or two, but that's about where I am in the game. Where are you, and what do you think about BDSP?
I am just exiting the Pastoria gym, Crasher Wake, which is he's one of
Sure.
my favorite gym leaders in Pokemon history,
Great
just because
gym
he's
leader.
he's just a fucking fella. He's got this whole energy about him. I love him. But I beat that gym in the time that it took you to go take a shit, literally,
Yes.
before we were recording this, and that is pretty indicative of a lot of what makes this game, in my opinion. And I'm kind of saving this big overarching statement for the title of our full review. But
Yes. Yes.
pretty much on every level, the worst Pokemon game that has ever been released.
That's very interesting because I don't feel that personally. I think for me, it's not the game isn't bad. It's just also not good. I think in my opinion, um, it does highlight the flaws of the series, and I want to talk about that with you. But
Yes.
I just think for me that this is Diamond and Pearl again, right?
Mhm.
And there are things that are new and wrong, like the art style that I want to talk about. But ultimately, for me, this just feels like a missed opportunity, and instead just feels like more Pokemon.
Now, here's the thing. I agree with you, but I would say that is actually why I'm making that
Sure,
claim.
sure,
Is
sure.
can you look back at any generation that we've got, whether it be controversial like Sword and Shield or any past generation, and say this was a missed opportunity. This
Yeah,
was boring. This was by the numbers. Every Pokemon generation has at least moved us forward in some way. And this is the first time in the history of the series that we are not making that forward momentum.
true.
And
Great
because
point.
it highlights the issues with the older generations of Pokemon, it also highlights the fact that this game had very little effort put into it and things could have been ironed out. And all
Totally
these
right.
things could have happened to make this the definitive version of Sinnoh and one of the games, Pokemon games on the Switch that you can add to that catalog. But I think what it does instead is pull attention away from what Pokemon can be and brings it back to what it was, while pointing out those flaws in very, very glaring ways. I do think that this makes Diamond or Pearl feel antiquated. It makes me really
Sure.
almost not want to go back to those old games, but really want to go back to those old games because they're not this. And it doesn't, those old games don't have the things that make it very obvious where the flaws are.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right about that. It's kind of an interesting thing to see just how faithful these games ended up being. And
Yes.
I think that this is for better and worse, the
Mm-hmm.
identity of BDSP. And I might say, I think you're going to pretty clearly say for worse, and I just say they're just here. For me, my sentiment of not caring about these games just really translates through because
Mm-hmm.
the glitches from Diamond and Pearl are back. The routes to Diamond and Pearl are back. Everything is here, basically one to one with a couple peculiar changes as we can talk about. But I just find it hard to motivate any enthusiasm because I have played so much Pokemon in my life
Yeah.
that nothing here, it just feels like we're on the baseline.
Yeah.
And if anything, it showed me how we've moved beyond what
Yes.
this game is.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I don't know if that detracts negatively on this game as much as it casts something like a Sword and Shield in a much more positive light for me than it was already in.
Yes.
It's just in every sense of the term feels like a stopgap.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's interesting that you say it puts a good light on the newer games, because I think that's actually the biggest problem with this game, and why it's funny when I say, okay, I would rather go back to the old games because they're not this, but I would most certainly rather go back to the newer games because they're not this. So it leaves this in a place where this I will finish the game. I want to have completed every mainline Pokemon game. I'm putting in that energy to continue my track record of doing that.
Yeah.
But nothing about this game makes me want to play it as opposed to any other entry in the Pokemon series, which is why I say this is not the game functions. The game is designed on the bones of Diamond and Pearl, which were great in their time. And I clearly have a very big amount of nostalgia for that. And I know you do as well, that being my first ever video game, especially my introduction to the Pokemon series. But how this points backwards while pointing out the flaws, I think makes this an obvious downgrade, in my opinion, especially when you compare it to the track record of the rest of the Pokemon franchise, and especially the other remakes that we've gotten, all with Fire and Leaf Green, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and the Let's Go games, which is something that we talked about in our pulse check as well, of us sort of wondering what kind of energy this game would have. And the answer really is no energy. And that's kind of how I feel going through it, is no energy. But that no energy is making me realize, wow, this is the first time in my life I'm not excited or interested by a Pokemon game.
Yeah, I think what's becoming far more interesting to me than BDSP itself is both who made BDSP and what BDSP represents.
Sure.
Because I don't know if you've seen this circulating, but if you look, when you get to the credits of the game, Ilka is only one of a lot of support studios who made this game.
Really?
Which is not as Lutu. I don't know if anybody in the audience follows him, but he is a really great and I think really fair Pokemon content creator.
Sure. Yeah.
And he was talking about, which is totally right. It's not uncommon for a lot of development to be outsourced. Something like The Last of Us Part 2 has a lot of support studios.
Yeah.
Because when you make a game of scale, you need people to just churn out assets and things like that, right? But I think that the idea of churning things out is really what made BDSP. And for me, that's far more interesting than the game itself, because we can talk about the art style as I want to, and we can talk about the new HM system and some of the little changes made, but ultimately for me this is just Pokemon existing so that we can put Game Freak's energy elsewhere. And ultimately because of that, I just look at BDSP and think, fine. Like, honestly, I didn't want Game Freak giving Diamond and Pearl what they would have needed to give it for it to be compelling. I think they were in a really hard position where I want Legends Arceus, I want Generation 9. I think that the remake train was starting to putter out, because if you're playing Platinum, you're already playing a pretty good game that doesn't necessarily need a remake the ways that the older games do. And because of that, everything just funnels back to the fact that this is a very cynical game. This is a game created with purely for the profit motive to clear stuff off of Game Freak's plate and just give us something to play. And because of that, it's here.
It is here. I think all of that is true, and I do agree with you. But all of that stuff puts me in a cynical and frankly negative mindset. None of that is a good reflection on the existence of this game, the quality of this game, the playability of this game is there. But when you're looking for the pretty consistent quality of Nintendo's first party studios, the very consistent quality of Game Freak, who of course Pokemon fans love to argue about what Pokemon games are the best, but when it really comes down to it, is almost every Pokemon game is on the same level of quality. It comes down to what factors you prioritize enjoyment wise in your Pokemon game to why you would prefer generation over the other. What I do think this game does is give people who are really nostalgic for the old games and hate the new games a lot of fuel, but it also gives the people who love the new games and don't like the old games a lot of fuel, because it is pretty divisive in its defenders and its haters, myself included.
Well, the thing about it is I don't even know if this really speaks to those older fans. I think that this game...
you should speak to them, because I've seen a lot of people online and in conversations with my friends saying, holy shit, this reminds me of what the glory days of Pokemon used to be. And that really puzzles me because as I'm playing through this game, and obviously I grew up in that era of Pokemon games,
Yeah.
I've played all those old Pokemon games. I do think that this, as we've been saying, points out the glaring issues that the older games have and make me, holy shit, just so impressed by how far the series has come.
I think the thing about it for me is that Diamond and Pearl, really, I think most Pokemon before Gen 6 really, but maybe even before Gen 5 was more difficult and it had there's a different feel to it
Sure.
that BDSP completely discards because you're totally right about that progress.
Yeah.
And that progress results in games that are much more interesting and that don't have the sort of rigid formula that we have
Yeah.
here, which still existed through 5 and 6 and 7 to an extent with the wild battles and things, but we're certainly advancing a lot of elements of the formula irrespective of that. But like these games are really easy. They're
the easiest Pokemon game, I think bar none. This is not even a joke. I've not been grinding. I've not been spending a ton of time doing extra content. I've been going through the game at my normal pace, which is catching every Pokemon that I come across, making sure I evolve stuff because I like filling out the Pokedex. That's my goal. But I don't even battle all the trainers on the routes. I skim past them to get to the next town. And my Pokemon are so overleveled, they're starting to not listen to me.
interesting.
I am at the point where I don't have enough gym badges for my Pokemon to follow my instructions because they're so overleveled.
So for where I am right now, I'm about on par with the. I'm a couple levels above the trainers on a route, which you end up being in pretty much every Pokemon game anyway. But I've been pretty much on the level curve. Now, I've heard that Grand Underground completely breaks the level curve.
I haven't interacted with that almost at all.
Okay. I went down into it once just to see it.
Me too.
Not very impressive.
No, it's not very interesting. It's certainly not very grand.
But I definitely want to engage with that more. And then that'll be a good thing to talk about in the review, I think. But I just think that a lot of the stuff on a less noticeable level that made the older Pokemon games interesting is not here. And one of the greatest things that's talked about by people like Tamashi Hiroka, who is the OG and best Pokemon YouTuber, in my opinion, at least my favorite.
Isn't J-Wits the OG Pokemon YouTuber?
They really came up together. They're actually good friends. I like both of them quite a bit.
Yeah, they're both great.
I can still rap J-Witz's Profit Pokemon TCG show theme song.
I'm not even familiar with that.
That's a real deep memory that I must have repressed or something. But like in the older Pokemon games, raising a team was important, and you had to be deliberate about how you were sharing experience, and getting a new party member was an ordeal. And now for some people, that is just grinding, and I totally get that perspective. But I think at the same time, for somebody who wanted a little bit of a stiffer challenge, or at least a more deliberate challenge, there was a real method to how you would approach a route to get experience for your new party members. And raising a Pokemon felt important because it felt like you had to put a lot of work in to level them up. Sure. That's just not the case here.
Yeah.
The way that EXP is distributed, I do not think has been adjusted for the experience share, as some people.
No, it certainly has not.
People were like, "Oh, it's balanced for the experience share." It just is not balanced for the experience share.
No, it's not.
And it feels like, I think if you want to talk about nostalgia, the nostalgia here feels completely hollow.
Oh, I certainly agree, and I think that's because these games aren't modernized to the standards of modern Pokemon gameplay or modern video game gameplay like the past generations or past remakes of generations have been. It's funny that you say that the battling feels really hollow in its progression, and the modernization that kind of takes away that old style energy. But I also think that the secondary or I guess kind of primary aspect of Pokemon, which is the collection aspect, which is exploring and discovering new species, which is my personal favorite aspect of the series and why I've grown to love it so much throughout my entire life, is the weakest here I've ever seen it, because you are given the over leveling of the experience share. You're given ways to just sort of cheese around things and not really have to interact with stuff. And what that leads you to realize is that because you're not grinding and don't have to see all this stuff, is there's very little variety in this game. The variety of the regional decks in Sinnoh, and especially Diamond and Pearl, which is where they chose to draw from, is the weakest I think it's ever been in the series. I am halfway through the game, route-wise. I'm still seeing Bidoofs and Starlies and Geodudes, and all
Yeah.
these Pokemon are not particularly visually interesting. The amount of new Pokemon is very low. I do like what Sinnoh did of recontextualizing old evolution lines and giving them babies and evolutions and stuff, but most those are mostly later on in the game. So, and they support the weak new Pokemon decks with the absolute bare bones dregs of the past generations. It's not exciting to see Zubat and Geodude and Wurmple for the fucking umpteenth time. This is the fourth generation in a row that Zubat and Geodude have been in, and you're getting those in only like the caves are basically only that, and they're outside in the grass. There's so little variety to what you're running into that it makes it really poor and uninteresting to go through these routes more than just once. You're lucky if you maybe find one or two new species of Pokemon on a route when you enter it for the first time.
It comes back to what I think is the weird tension between the uber faithful design and the weird changes made here or there.
Sure, yeah.
Because if I were at Ilka, one of the first things I would say is we cannot just do Diamond and Pearl. This just has to be Sinnoh. It has to be, I would have said we need to do a Platinum remake.
Yeah, of course.
Because the Pokemon diversity is so anemic, especially in this game. Yes. You know, there's, as I was just checking, there's what, 3 or 4 fire type species evolution families in this game, including the starter.
Sinnoh? In Diamond and Pearl.
Diamond and Pearl.
Yes. There's Chimchar, Ponyta, maybe Growlithe, technically Flareon, like Heatran and Slugma, maybe. Oh, Magby, yeah, true.
Some of them are version exclusives. I would have said, okay, we need because those platinum Pokemon are sometimes in the Grand Underground, but we need to just infuse more into this game because I agree with you in the sense that element of the game is lacking, especially when you put everything back under the grass, so you don't know who you're encountering until you encounter them. Because
I'll run into 10 B barrels in a row on the routes that I'm on, or if it's not a B barrel, it's a Staravia or a Kricketune, which is the second evolution of the Pokemon I was encountering on the first route of the game.
It's back to the thing of it's back to a numbers game of I'm just gonna do 10 encounters on this road, and if I find something, I find something. If I find fucking 10 Bidoofs, I find 10 Bidoofs. But when you could walk into an area in Let's Go, walk into an area in Sword and Shield, see them on the overworld, you don't see what you want, exit the route, come back in, refresh the Pokemon. Not only was that far more playable, but it was far less mediated. I think that the old Pokemon games are mediated like turn-based Japanese role-playing games. Random encounters, basically everything is on stats. I think we did a great job of moving away from a disjunction between overworld stuff and battling stuff.
Sure, yeah.
Between Pokemon feeling like they are living things and just numbers being generated by the code, and we're just looking back on that. And ultimately, for me, again, it's this thing of like, I loved Pokemon until 2018 with random encounters, with all this shit. So it doesn't feel bad to me. It just feels old. And I think there's something interesting about it feeling old, but it just feels old.
Yeah, it's just like we've moved past that. Society has moved past the need for random encounters. And I think pretty much categorically for the better. And I think these games do feel weaker retrospectively because of that. You look at what Gen 4 did on the DS, whether that be the visuals, which I want to talk about next, or the random encounters, or any certain sort of blockiness or mechanics. That was the best that we had seen so far. It was impressive for the time. When you go back and play those games, they're in the context of playing it on this hardware with the development history and being released in fucking 2006. This game has all those issues on the newest Nintendo console. I think that's what really frustrates me. And none of that frustrates me more than how faithful the art style and world design is here, because it is, holy fuck, it's just awful. I really hate everything about it.
I would like these games significantly more if they didn't look the way they did.
Yeah.
And it sucks to say that because ultimately I just think that the issues with the art style and I think its inconsistency
Mhm.
just obscures the fact that mechanically the game is fine.
Mhm.
For all we're saying about the game feeling old, it also just feels fine. You know, I played Crystal earlier this year and I had a great time with Crystal because
Mhm.
ultimately I do think even though the Pokemon formula has grown, it's evergreen to an extent,
Sure.
right? Sure, I'm playing Crystal and I want the modernizations to, you know, the user experience and things, but ultimately Pokemon endures. But when you put this Pokemon formula under what is just such, I think, a misguided art style,
Mhm.
it makes it so hard to connect to the world of Pokemon.
Yeah.
Because when I play Crystal, I can become still lost in that version of Johto because that is what the Game Boy Color could do. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like I have played enough video games that I can understand when a game released and contextualize my expectations for immersion to
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, of course.
But here, the art style is a gimmick.
Mhm.
The idea of the chibi is a gimmick to recapture what was a technical limitation.
Yes.
And it does it in a way that is completely graphically inconsistent.
I definitely agree. I think what you contextualize this against every other game in the series is when they were pixelated, that was the best the hardware could do, and you had the benefit of being able to enhance it with your imagination. You look at the sprites in Gen 1, you look at the world design in Gen 3s and 4s, and you're like, I can see how this is attempting to try to build a large scale world. You are impressed when you go into Sinnoh and you see different layers
Yeah.
on the map where you're going underneath a bridge for the first time because that's the first time that it happened. It was the best
Yeah.
the hardware could do, and you were very impressed by it. But when you look at the environments that are presented here in their very blocky fashions I think to a very large detriment, it makes you realize, okay, well, this was cool for the time, but holy shit, does it feel antiquated now? And I think nowhere is that more clear than through the lens of the art style placed over environments that have not been modernized at all. Blocks like a tree or a rounded corner of a hill still have an invisible corner
Yes.
on them. Your character can move in 360-degree movement, pretty fluid movement, but the environments are not redesigned to account for that, meaning you are constantly bumping into walls. You're constantly going, ooh, it's hard to steer yourself through these tight corridors because they're designed to move on a grid. It wasn't a problem in Gen 4 on the DS because, of course, you were
You had a
moving on that
D-pad.
grid. Exactly. Well, yeah. And I think that's even more obvious when you hop on your bike and you're trying to go anywhere and the bike is moving too fast for the environments to account for, and you're running into walls. And I actively do not like riding my bike in this game unless it's in a big open city because I'm just running into stuff. It's actually more frustrating to navigate these environments when you're going faster, when you have that free movement speed, because it hasn't been adapted to account for its modernization. And I think on top of that, and it being clunky to play through, it's pretty visually uninteresting. These layouts were great for the DS, but when you're seeing the same tree texture over and over and over again, everything is just trees or grass or mud. Everything, it just feels flat and lifeless and not like a real world at all.
It's it again goes back to the fact that I think this game was pretty clearly just built on top of the code base of
Mm-hmm.
Diamond and Pearl. For as many hands as were in this honeypot, they were just using Diamond and Pearl. They're just using the same map, bring it over, which is like at a certain point, then why even give us full 360-degree movement?
Yeah.
I know you want to do it to make it feel newer, but Link's Awakening gave us 8 directions and it was fine. You
Yeah.
know, you need to make movement match to the map that you're on. If
100%.
you're not going to modernize the map, then don't modernize the movement, and that'll be annoying, but it'll at least all mesh together.
Mm-hmm. And you'll
But
get used to it. At
yes,
that point, it will feel like, okay, this is designed for the world and it'll become second nature. I think the
yeah,
problem is the disconnect, which I'm playing, normal 360 movement. I'm like, okay, this feels like any other top-down RPG I've played with modern controls. But then you're moving to the old-fashioned environments. So like, ooh, ooh, ooh. I have videos of myself trying to get through a cave and just running into walls and jagging around corners
yeah.
and stuff because it very clearly is not designed for that.
It's not designed for that. And also, I yes, I don't really have much more to say there, but I
No,
have
of
a lot
course.
to say about the visuals,
Sure. Yes.
just
Let's
the
go for it.
quality of the game visually. I think it is both the worst looking Pokemon game and the best looking Pokemon game. I think that the battles are really good.
Hmm.
I think that the battle environments and the trainers standing in the background, the trainers are stiff, yes, but I think that the fact that all with very rare exception being like the Team Galactic battles,
Hmm.
you are put in the world. Now,
Yeah.
immediately, this is going to be obliterated by Legends Arceus, where you literally throw out the Pokemon where the other Pokemon is standing.
Yeah.
But I think that that attention to detail feels so far beyond what we get in other places in the game
Yeah.
that it feels out of place. But I still think it's worthy of praise because when I'm in a battle, especially playing in handheld mode, I think the game actually looks quite good.
I agree to an extent. I do think that it is the best looking element of the game. It's the obvious place where the most attention to detail was put
Yeah,
in the fact that these environments aren't flat. There's hills in the background. There's trees being placed in certain places. One of the greatest details being in almost every outside battle, you can see Mount Coronet looming in the background
yeah.
of those battles, and that's a great attention to detail. Those small things are worthy of praise, but personally, I do think that this game's art style, even in those battles, makes them the most plasticky and
Sure,
flat that they've
sure.
ever been. This lighting engine is not on par with Sword and Shield or Let's Go. I do think that those models have more life to them because the lighting engine and color palette allow them to
Sure.
feel less plasticky. If you sit there and look at what the character models are or the Pokemon in the battles, they're the flattest that they've ever looked. And I
That's a good
thought
point.
that with Let's Go, but in retrospect, I was just watching some Let's Go gameplay yesterday. It has a much more consistent color palette that gives more
Sure.
life to these characters. You look at Charizard and it's flapping its wings, and there's like a little bit of sheen on it as the light glints off it and stuff. This game does not have that because they didn't have the time or effort or money put into making that consistent. So while I do agree, I do think that this compared to the art style of the last few games is the worst that it's looked.
I think it comes down to the fact that there was clearly a knee-jerk reaction to how the games looked upon reveal,
Mm-hmm.
and what they did to the games visually was not fundamental. It was surface level.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah. Which
And
which goes which you're right, and that
yes,
sort of veneer around it is peeled away as soon as you start to experience more of the game. It
yeah,
becomes just what is there, and what is there clearly is very cheap.
yeah. And I think I see where you're coming from. For me, I think that the battles end up looking pretty good. I just
Mm-hmm.
think that the level of immersion that is brought by those environments, and I do like the color palette of the game. So for me, it works. But I totally get what you're saying about the lighting engine, which for me is a much larger issue when you are in the overworld.
Sure.
The
No,
overworld
I
is
certainly agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
the overworld is where the game really I think starts to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I think this is the only game that I've played on Switch, at least on a triple A, and I put that in quotes, triple A
Mm-hmm.
level of quality, where the game is much better visually in handheld mode than on the TV.
Yes.
Um, because on the TV, then the textures are stretched to shit, and the game legitimately stops looking HD.
Mm-hmm.
When it's all
Yes.
squished a little bit more onto that handheld screen, it looks a lot better. But in either case, like I said, what they did to this game visually is basically all band-aids. The colors are softened. Everything is
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more pastel than when we originally saw it, and everything is bloomed out. And the game has this, and I want you to just fucking take the ball from me as soon as I say this. It has this depth of field effect that has no consistency.
I have, as I've played more of the game, I've started noticing it less and less, and I've just probably just me getting used to it. But it's
Yeah.
really jarring for those
Yes.
first few hours of the game. It's not. Link's Awakening was also bad with that. I certainly don't enjoy it in that game either. But it's even weirder here because it's not around the edges of the screen. It's not like, okay, this is outside of Link's field of view, so you want to focus on him. But you're moving through these environments, and there are, I believe, two strips of blur applied to the top of the screen and the bottom of the screen, meaning that like you're in this layer of clear gameplay as opposed to what's in the foreground and the background. And it's I think clearly intended to paint over the fact that there is even less effort put into what's in the background and the foreground. Like it's just the tree textures repeating over and over again. It's like, okay, we'll blur that out. Like it's the idea of trees that are there. But I do think that it's really bad. It's not the problem that I had most with the game because I have gotten used to it. I still don't enjoy it, but I have gotten used to it. But I think that this game is the worst looking first party Nintendo game that we've gotten on the Switch because this genuinely looks from the texture quality and the model quality like it was made for either the Wii or early 3DS, which is really, really poor. This game looks like it could run. It looks worse than Skyward Sword did on the Wii or Mario Galaxy.
Yeah, it's part of me wonders. Well, I think we have our answer that this game was probably made pretty quickly, so it probably undercuts that. But I wonder if there was plans for what BDSP is to have been a 3DS game at some point in time. I don't think that those timelines and line up for that to be true.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if this art style, these ideas were conceptualized for that era, because that's what it feels in line with.
Yes,
but
no, certainly.
I agree with you. I actually really like the depth of field in Link's Awakening. I think it does a great job because Link's Awakening also has a much stronger artistic footprint. But
better textures and better lighting.
Yes, everything about that game is deliberate, and sort of diorama feel, I think, is helped by the fact that there's a depth of field around the edges, which I think gives everything more dimension than there would be otherwise.
Sure, no, that's a good point.
That game does not feel flat. It really does feel like, for as toy-like as it is, that there is a sense of world here.
Yeah.
When I play BDSP,
a toy world.
Yeah. When I play BDSP, as you said, I think perfectly, it's just this shit layered on top of the world. And I think the game looks a lot better when they get rid of that. Sure. You know? Because then you're just dealing with what is a misguided, but I think serviceable chibi art style. I think some of the chibi models actually look quite good, especially for the individual characters, your gym leaders, your galactic commanders. Basically, every named character except for your character model, I think looks quite good as a little chibi man.
Yeah, but I agree to an extent because I appreciate the idea of them taking these sprites that were seen from top down and obviously in 2D and okay, what would that sort of stumpy person look like if it was rendered into 3D? That's a cool concept. However, the flat textures of the game don't necessarily service that to the best of its ability. And also, the game does this really weird thing where it loves to do cinematic camera angles, where it'll zoom in on your character talking to Rowan or Wake or Cyrus or whoever. And when you get down to that level, it points out that these are not designed to be seen from this angle. Their faces are incredibly pixelated. Their movements and their animations are incredibly stiff. They're meant to be seen from far away and certainly not at like up the nose camera angle that they like to do. It's a really weird choice that I think actually makes the game's art style worse. And if they had just not done that, because this is a faithful remake, Diamond and Pearl did not have dramatic camera angles, and I put that in air quotes because it's just the camera going like it doesn't have a fluid movement to it. It jerks down to this position, but it highlights the problems with the art style even further in a choice that did not need to be in the game. And sometimes the environments are not calibrated for camera moving down. I believe you also did this when you go through Mount Coronet the first time and you run into Cyrus. You are on a staircase and he is not, and the staircase is filling up part of the screen.
It is a brown texture.
Yeah, and his big ass head is filling up the center of the screen, and he's just standing there like, because there's no animation on the faces or anything. So there's just really no life or character to these things, even though it totally could have been if these were fluidly animated toy-like characters with great textures and great lighting engine that gives it a sense of place. That's the realization of that concept that I think they were trying to go for, but clearly the effort and time and money were not spent on making that dream a reality.
Yeah, and I said to you, it would have been so cool if they're going to go with the chibi stuff to just carry the chibi into battle. If they went to the effort of taking that regional decks and some of the platinum stuff and whatever, and making little chibi models out of all of them, that would have been awesome. I think there's ways, as you're saying, to follow through on this idea
Yeah.
but there is very little follow through here.
Yeah. And I think at that point, you even do, the HD backgrounds, but you put them on the little circles in the environment and stuff. Like, really, it's weird where this game draws the line between faithful and trying to make it modern in a way that I think makes both elements actually actively worse.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. I think personally, I do prefer that level of uh, immersion in the battle scenarios.
Sure, that's a good point.
But it definitely it does just bring up the same contrast of, okay, what's changing, what's staying the same, why is this changing, why is that staying the same, so
I think for me it is that inconsistency that you were pointing out when we watched that trailer for the first time. And okay, the overworld does not look like the battles at all. If it was the same in environment models of the trees and the tall grass and stuff, and you had toy versions of your Pokemon with your fat little fucking guy back there, like, all that would feel consistent and would feel like, okay, this is actually fits in the world that I am currently exploring. But there's a obviously very huge disconnect when you go, the grass passes by and you're in a almost Let's Go or Sword and Shield level environment with the same kind of models.
it's weird.
It's fucking weird.
I don't really have a whole lot more to say in the context of this discussion. Ultimately, I think there's more stuff I'd talk about. I would just save it for a review. The music sounds really good for the most part.
You do?
Yeah. Except for when a trainer battle starts and you end up hearing the audio come like this as it goes in and out. And I don't understand. I thought my Switch was like fucking dying on me when the first time it happened. But I think
the music's totally serviceable, but I really don't think it lacks the punch and the epicness that it could have. It kind of just feels like they ran it through fucking GarageBand.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of the remixes do sound good, but I don't necessarily think Sinnoh had the best soundtrack to begin with, comparatively. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna finish the game. I'm reviewing it for RetroWare, so I have to finish the game. But it's funny. This is a complete non sequitur, but I'm also playing Knights of the Old Republic at the same time, and it's just like there's just
that game came out before Diamond Pearl, correct?
Yeah, it came out in 2003.
Yeah,
there is just a different universe where Pokemon grew, and I think that this game does draw into contrast how much we have improved.
Yes, 100%.
But at the same time, I just still think that when you play games beyond Pokemon in the JRPG genre or the Western RPG genre, the difference from BDSP to Sword and Shield really is not that big. Ultimately,
we're comparing it to Dragon Quest 1 to Dragon Quest 11.
Yeah, it's just like this game just reaffirms my excitement for Legends Arceus 100%. Because
as something new for the Pokemon franchise,
as something new, because yes, we don't have random encounters. Yes, we've got a more ambitious visual style. Yes, we've got more complex battle mechanics and things, but it is still this. And I think that's part of the reason why I just don't feel super negative towards this game.
Yeah.
Because it is just still Pokemon to me, and I really hope that it's Legends Arceus that makes these older Pokemon games look bad, by merit of being exceptional, by merit of moving the series forward. Because for me, this is like, it'd be like if I looked at a picture of myself from senior year of high school. Like, yeah, I'm a bigger person now. I'm in better shape. I have a different haircut, but it's still me. You know what I mean? I guess we'll see. I just want Pokemon to do something different. And it's happening in 8 weeks.
Holy Christ. No, that's exactly true. Jesus,
yeah, 8 weeks until Arceus.
That's the one plus side of this, which is not related to the release of this game at all. Or I guess it is they decided to release them close together. So I don't have to have this sour taste in my mouth for too long.
These games are also selling exceptionally well. So I don't understand why they put them so close. Yeah, I think it's the second in the UK. It's the second biggest launch of the year, period, only behind FIFA. So, which is exceptional. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, of course.
Extraordinary. So, I still don't know why Game Freak released them so close together, but I'm not complaining. But I am, if it means Legends Arceus is rushed. We'll see. Tucker, do you want to say anything else?
Mm-mm.
Fine. We'll talk to you later.
Are you ready, my
I'm ready.
Pokemaniac pal?
I am. I wore an app shirt for the occasion.
So did I. Any
Uh,
shirt. Because let me tell you, this is a game that does not deserve to see my nipples.
It's a great point.